Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everyone. Craig Pasta-Jarduli here. I have a great power panel for you today, ladies and gentlemen, on Ukraine and Russia. All these people need no introduction, so I'm just going to introduce them really quick, and we're going to get right on into it. First, I have Jimmy Dore. How you doing, Jimmy?
Good to see you.
Great to be here. I'm glad you're happy. And Scott Ritter.
Hello.
How you doing? Sean Stone.
Yes, sir.
And Lara Logan.
Hi.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Listen, we're going to start off a little bit unusual today because for the morning show, we're actually thinking about using a theme song. And I wanted to get your guys' opinion about it. Listen to it really quick. It's about a minute. And then I want to get your opinions about it. Go ahead, listen.
If you don't glow the sky, I will die. If you don't glow the sky, Mom will cry. If you don't glow the sky, he'll lose home. If you don't glow the sky, they'll be dumb. If you don't glow the sky will still fight. If you don't glow the sky, we'll fail the night. If you don't glow the sky, he might win. Now look in his eyes and sing again.
I would like to invite to the stage Bill Crystal, who is the founding director of Defending Democracy Together.
Okay. So that was not a joke. The song itself, not even the fact that they introduced Bill Crystal right after. Jimmy, I'm going to start with you. I want your opinions because it seems like the jokes are writing themselves nowadays. Go ahead. Your thoughts on that song.
That song made me sleepy. It made me really long for I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons. And I don't know about you guys, but I wish I was there to hear what Bill Crystal had to say. I hope you're going to play some of it, but it's always so interesting. You never know what he's going to say next.
Sean, do you think that this is intelligence kind of pushing this kind of rhetoric and doing these kind of rallies here at home? We obviously saw in Ukraine that there was a lot of like dark entities involved with their media, whatnot, in their rallies. What do you think about this one here at home?
Oh, wow. No, I mean, certainly that's a clear case of propaganda using the lullaby. I mean, this just takes me back to that in the first Iraq war when they were selling us, on fighting for Kuwait, and they had I think it was the ambassador's niece. She was a family member of the ambassador that basically, took one of the Kuwaiti ambassadors. Basically, she was testifying to Congress that the Iraqis were ripping babies, from basically from their cradles and massacring them. I mean, it was horrendous propaganda that they were selling. It was all false. It was just pure, it was just purely designed by Washington lobbyists and firms, obviously tied to the military-industrial complex to sell us in this war. And just like, here's this lullaby, and then it's bringing Bill Crystal, one of the architects of our warmongering policy, one of the head neoconservatives. It's so clear. I think that just says it all right there.
Scott, we hear a lot of talks about on the ground. If you're watching the mainstream media, there's a lot of talks of kind of like David versus Goliath, where the Ukrainian militias are beating back the mighty Russians and the big bear that so badly that, Russia had to go to Xi Jinping and asked, China for weapons and whatnot. But when you listen to a lot of independent journalists out there like Gonzalo Lira, he tells a different story. What are you hearing? What's going on the ground?
Well, I'm hearing the same thing everybody's hearing. If you listen to mainstream media, you get obviously the point of view from the Ukrainian government, magnified by various Western intelligence services that are assisting in this information operation that is mainstream media. And then you also can plug into the Russian Ministry of Defense, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and get the Russian point of view. I'll say right off the bat, the Russians are not running a very effective information warfare operation. I think they're losing the information war, but that doesn't change the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground are simple. Russia has two primary military objectives: denazification, demilitarization. Denazification being the dismantling and eradication of not only the military embodiment of the neo-Nazi ideology in Ukraine today, the Azov Battalion and its progeny, but also the political empowerment. That is, the political parties that worship this man Stepan Bandera and his ideology. The these military formations will be destroyed, the personnel involved will be brought to justice, and the political parties will be eliminated through appropriate legislation. That's denazification. Demilitarization is the dismantlement of what was a de facto proxy of NATO, the Ukrainian military, 260,000 strong, since 2015 has been trained by NATO trainers, American, British, Canadian, and others. They are now certain select battalions are interoperable with NATO, meaning that you can literally unplug them from Ukraine, plug them in anywhere in the NATO hierarchy, and they'll function, perfectly. They are trained, equipped, led. They operate according to NATO doctrine. They are a de facto NATO military, and this was unacceptable to the Russians, and so the Russians are going to eliminate it one way or the other. They gave the Ukrainians the option for the easy approach: stay in your barracks while we get rid of your weapons, or if you want to fight, we'll fight. And that's what's happening right now. Russia is pursuing these two military objectives, and they are succeeding, by the way. I mean, you won't read about this in the mainstream media. You won't see it on TV, but the Russians are, they're killing Ukrainians at a ratio of 7-to-1. That's military personnel. The civilian to combatant death ratio is the lowest in modern military history. Normally you have a 1-to-1 ratio. Right now it's 1-to-5, which means that the Russians are going out of their way not to kill civilians, not to destroy civilian infrastructure. Again, you won't see this on mainstream media, but this is the reality. This is ground truth. Phase 1 is over. Russia's entering into phase 2. And amazingly, the mainstream media is calling this a Russian military defeat. We'll find out when all's said and done. But right now, the Russian military is fighting a very determined Ukrainian military. 260,000 Ukrainians fighting 200,000 Russians. Think about it. When the normal offense to defense ratio is 3-to-1, 3 attackers for 1 defender, the Russians are pretty much flipped that, and they're still prevailing. That's the reality of what's going on the ground today.
Yeah, it's crazy when you see a lot of these videos surfacing right now too as well. It seems like the only tactic that the Ukrainians have left is to be like just crazy barbaric. I mean, there's been a lot of videos that have been taken down, alleged Russian soldiers getting shot in the leg, just murdering and taping people to poles and whatnot. Lara, you've got in trouble for a lot of your reporting at times. What is your overall assessment about how the West is kind of reporting this particular crisis right now?
Well, I would disagree with your first statement about me getting in trouble, because you'd have to care about the people making those claims in order for that to be true. And I couldn't care less about them, because what they're reporting is so inaccurate and so dishonest. So why would they be the standard by which I or anyone else should judge my reporting, right? I mean, I'm interested in the truth. That's what I'm worried about. And when you are ignoring the voices of Ukrainian civilians who are saying we were being shelled and shot at not by Russian troops, but by our own troops, and they're on YouTube, and there are journalists on the ground who are talking to them, and this reporting is out there, how can you ignore it? So if you're one of those media organizations, or, I mean, if you're talking about Media Matters for America, I mean, these are the worst people in America, right? These are some of the worst people on earth. They're paid propagandists. Their only job is to be political assassins. They come after real reporters. They are interested only in pushing propaganda for their own agenda. And they are just as militant with their own side as they are with the others. So I wouldn't give any weight to anything that anyone from Media Matters for America says. And if you're one of their patsies all across the media, or one of these morons in one of these media sites, then, good luck to you. I got no time for you, because we're facing a situation where our leaders are talking about, they're escalating this on a daily basis. They're talking about nuclear weapons. They're talking about Putin's going to do this, chemical attacks, biological attacks, World War III. And you think that I'm going to care about what a bunch of morons who haven't reported anything accurately for years have to say about it? I don't care about them. I mean, we're in a much more serious situation here, where we, for the first time, have journalists who are in a war, have no curiosity about the recent history of Ukraine, never mind its past. that they don't bother to look at the origins of these battalions. They don't bother to look at all the mass graves across Lugansk and Donbass and Odessa and all across eastern Ukraine. And yet they claim to care about Ukrainian civilians, but what? Only the ones that are killed now by the Russians? And we don't even know. We don't even know how many people are being killed, because the numbers that the Ukrainian government is putting forward are just a joke. They're absolutely laughable. There's nobody who's spent 4.5 seconds in any form of combat who thinks that the Ukrainian figures are real. They're not. They're a complete lie. And, you know, it's interesting, the point that Scott made about Putin losing the information war. How could Putin win the information war? He doesn't stand a chance, because you're talking about people who control Google, Facebook, Twitter, half of the rest of social media, the whole, you know, add the media onto that, add the late night talk shows, add the White House, add all their, you know, all the NATO propaganda, all the NATO countries. I mean, that's what every single one of us is facing. They're just going to say that, you know, we're a bunch of conspiracy theorists, right? What's their latest word for me? Unhinged. I wouldn't even know that if people wouldn't, you know, weren't sending it to me. I wish they'd stop sending it to me. I'm not interested in what those people have to say. So, you know, where we sit at the moment is that we have a very serious situation, in that in this country where the First Amendment is first for a reason, where we are lucky enough to have a Bill of Rights, journalists are not doing their jobs. And then they want to be critical of other people who are, they could get lost, you know. I honestly, they're not worth spending the time over. And so, and what we really have to focus on is, why don't we know the truth about what's happening on the Ukrainian battlefield? Where are we being led? Because, you know, there is serious concern. They're talking now about Putin's responsible for the energy crisis and Putin's responsible for the food crisis, except how many months ago, I reported, because I spoke to a very good source and confirmed with another source, fertilizer, the price of fertilizer, which is normally around $250 a ton, was already close to $350. And I was told that it would go to $950, and look where we are now. It's either at $950 or close to. And what does this mean? That farmers all over the world are not planting enough food because they cannot afford it. The supply chains have been down for months and months and months. And now suddenly it's Putin's fault that we don't have supplies. And what is going to happen to us when we're pushed into a global famine, right? And then they talk about, well, the Russians are going to shut down the banking system. Is it going to be the Russians? How would we know? That's not based on conspiracy. That's based on the fact that there is a very distinct pattern of information warfare. There's a tactic that's known as shaping the battlefield, and projecting onto your adversaries exactly what you intend to do. Well, how many times have we seen that? The very people who are responsible for a real, legal, seditious conspiracy have been accusing anyone who talked about Russia collusion, who asked critical questions, who asked honest questions, who asked valid, serious questions about it. They've been accused of being the conspirators, right? You know, we're all the conspiracy theorists. And yet it was absolutely true. They were 100% guilty of an organized and vast conspiracy where they attempted to take down and undermine a legally elected president, and more importantly, because it's not even just about the president, the will of the people, which is the foundation and the basis of governing in this country. And what they wanted us to believe was that we the people was a great idea until we the people actually exercised our rights. And then they wanted to say, oh, no, you horrible rednecks from flyover country, and you conspiracy theorists, and you deplorables, right? No, we didn't act. No, it's not serious. You're not actually supposed to vote. Don't you know we're much smarter than you? Do you know if I had a penny for every time at 60 Minutes or CBS, or when I worked at NBC or ABC or any of them, somebody had said, you know, give me a penny for every time they said the audience is too stupid to understand. Most Americans are ignorant. Most Americans are dumb. What? So we chosen ones in the media, we're the only smart ones? I mean, come on. Like, I'm so over all of this. I think we're in a much more critical phase at this point, and that us worrying about what these people say is just another form of distraction, which, in other words, actually in information warfare is called a DOS attack, a denial of service attack. So what they do is overwhelm you with so many things happening at the same time that you either can't make sense of it, or you're not getting much sense of it from your journalists and the leaders that you rely on, because they're overwhelmed as well. And right now we have a southern border that's wide open. Do you know how many thousands of Russians are coming over that border? If Russia is such a threat, how come we're not hearing anything about that? How come, if you're so worried about what Russia is going to do to you, you don't mind that they have an invitation to bring whatever the hell they want across the southern border? I mean, it's a very simple philosophy. 1 + 1 = 2. And they want us to believe that math now is white supremacy and so on and so on. And they want, because they want us to limit ourselves. And they want us to blind ourselves to the very simple reality that's around us, which is this. If you're worried about Russia attacking you, you don't open your southern border. If you feel that you're vulnerable to attack by a state adversary, you don't give advanced military technology and put it in the hands of terrorists, narco-terrorists. Give them their own state, nestled between two of the greatest state sponsors of terrorism in the world, i.e. Afghanistan, which sits between Iran and Pakistan. These are not the actions that people take when they care about their safety of their citizens, and they care about their sovereignty, and they care about securing their borders, and they care about prevailing in the world over their adversaries. So what we are faced with here is one layer of deception over another, and another. And whether it's our publishing companies, or it's our magazines, or it's our television, or late night talk shows, Hollywood, or the media, they're just more puppets. They're another layer, to separate us from the truth. And I have no problem with any of that, because I am very grounded in the truth. That's what I know and what I care about. That's what I'm trying to find out. I don't know everything, far from it. I'm very conscious of what I don't know, but I certainly know when I'm being lied to. And we've been lied to about Ukraine on every single front. And I really enjoyed listening to you, Scott, laying out the Azov Battalion and their affiliates, because what is really happening here is we're not just seeing the Russian military go to war with the Ukrainian military. We are seeing the Nazis, who we finance and equip, by the way. They're armed by us, the United States of America. That's our tax dollars. And I just can't say it enough to people. When are we going to stop financing our own destruction? Because that is what our taxpayer dollars are being used for. And I can think of no less worthy cause than that.
Yep. Well, for the record, Laura, when I said in trouble, I meant good trouble, that you're going over the radar, and that's why they're shooting you down. But you said a lot there. There's something I want to kind of dive a little bit into. Jimmy, I'm going to start with you on this one too as well. American intelligence has for long supported all these radical jihadist groups, or just radicals in general. We know about the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, which eventually spread, turned into Al-Qaeda, turned into ISIS, hit a couple buildings, are now all over the world. There's some in Africa and whatnot. Do you think that this particular supporting of this white ISIS group, as I like to call them, the Azov Battalion and these Nazis, do you think there's potential that whenever this conflict does end, that this type of kind of radicalism can spread throughout Asia and Eastern Europe?
Am I back now?
You're back on now.
So I'm not smart enough to answer that question, but I do know that the American people have no idea who we're in bed with trying to get our goals met. They have no idea about Operation Timber Sycamore. They have no idea what we were financing the very terrorists we claim to have the war on terror for. We're actually financing, providing arms with them, and it's all about pipelines, right? And so, as predicted, when I said, I don't know anything about this, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a pipeline involved in this Ukraine war. And of course there is. It's Nord Stream 2. And of course, they just announced that the United States is going to provide liquefied natural gas to Europe. And even though Europe's been getting, I guess, 40% of it from Russia. So this, again, and as Noam Chomsky said, that the reason why NATO has existed since 1991 is just to secure energy shipping lines and stuff, and transfers of wealth. So it's not about, and it's amazing to me that I've lived long enough now to see the American people never stopped trusting the people who lied to them. They've never stopped trusting the people who lied to them about Iraq. They love George Bush now because George Bush called half the country terrorists when he said the people who did January 6th were terrorists, right? So now all the horrible libs, they embrace him. And so I'm old enough to remember when all those people lied to us. I'm old enough to remember that Barack Obama, George Bush, Dick Cheney, Joe Biden, they're all war criminals. And there's this idea that, they've convinced people, so I go to dinner with my old roommate. And whenever I go to dinner with my roommate, who I first met, and when I moved to college, I know what the mainstream media is saying. And so he believes everything. He believes that the Nazi thing is all propaganda, that there's no such thing as that happening. That's what Putin says. I'm like, yeah, Putin also says water is wet. That doesn't mean it's not true. And so you see that the real Joe Biden made a gaffe, which is when you tell the truth accidentally. And Joe Biden is demented. So he told people that he wants, he slipped and said the truth. He wants regime change in Russia. And then he doubled down after they tried to. And then he just told, I saw another video, and I don't even think the White House knew this existed. There's another video out there where he tells troops that you're going to go to Ukraine. He says that in his speech to them. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But Joe Biden is obviously demented, and we're supposed to believe that he's leading this war effort. So it's certainly not Kamala Harris, and it certainly isn't Joe Biden. So who is it? Who are the people pulling the strings? Who are making these foreign policy decisions? I don't think the American people knows. I certainly don't know who's making the real decisions. It certainly isn't demented Joe Biden, and it certainly isn't Kamala Harris. So
I hear you.
But
and Sean,
if they can make you think that I'm refrain. I hope you don't get upset, but if they can make you think that a Nobel Prize winning medicine is poison, they can make you think anything.
Ooh, look at that. Well, Sean, who is calling the shots then? If it's not Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Obama, a lot of people start pointing to the World Economic Forum, Council of Foreign Relations, all these other groups that over the last 2 years seem that they have a big say in how our society is run. No?
Oh man, you really want to go there, huh? You want to go to the
I was like, ooh, I'm glad Sean got that one.
I've been holding that one for you, Sean.
Over to you, Sean.
So I've been looking at it since I was a kid, right? I mean, trying to figure out where the heck this power really lies, because I was a kid at 7 years old, in JFK, watching the movie and seeing, how the president was executed, and all these people say the president's the most powerful man in the world. I'm like, yeah, huh? So powerful. He just got his head blown off in public, and the media and everybody else just said, yeah, one guy took a lucky shot there. Come on, we got to wake up. The power is, there is a cabal. It's a 1 of 1% kind of thing. It's very you can locate it amongst, a certain class and ideology. I found it in what's called the New World Order. And it's funny because Biden obviously is out here saying it again, just like Bush did and Clinton and everybody. But that's a real term. I mean, this is a term that they've been using since the 20s and 30s in the imperial conferences of the British Empire, because the empire knew the British Empire at the time had a quarter of the world under their control, including Lower South Africa. And they had basically been fighting with the Boers before that, the turn of the 20th century, realizing that there was an extent to military power. And you don't have the manpower to actually enforce a global empire. You have to use financial controls. You have to use global organizations and sort of collaboration between parties. You have to groom people with Rhodes scholarships and things like this, bring them into your way of seeing the world, your legal structures, the bar being a British authority. You have to register with the British authority that is the bar. This whole concept of how the world is ruled, now they put under this lovely globalization term, but it's actually very much an ideology that's designed around global governance, taking, supranational organizations, International Monetary Fund, things like this, international bodies like the United Nations, NATO, etc. So it's very complex if you think about, how do all these people do this? How can they get this COVID thing to be implemented globally? Well, guess what? When you're the Gates Foundation, you have billions of dollars. You're basically selecting the heads of the WHO. You're totally in bed with Fauci and company. You're paying. You're working with a very select group of people to actually create the legislation, the mandates, the ideology. that goes into this. You create the Event 201 that scripts the whole freaking pandemic, the lines, the dialogue, everything that's told to you by the media, the social distancing, the mask wearing, everything being scripted. It's not difficult to understand how conspiracies work because it's a very select group of people that have access to billions of dollars and can literally groom the next tier, whether it's at an Ivy League school or whether it's the foundations that then funnel money into even some of the so-called, state colleges or whatnot, because it goes through programs, right? So they bring you in step by step, and that's how you end up at a CNN or at an MSNBC or any of these media outlets. It's not just by chance that you're able to actually be in the editor class that actually disseminates the information, or the banking class, at the heads of a BlackRock or any number of these, funds of funds. And so, it's like what happens is you have a world where the system protects itself. And that's why Jimmy's friends, like my old friends that are educated, know shit about reality, because either they've been bought and sold and bought into that game, that matrix, that system that they feel, oh, it's done me so well, I've made money, so I'm going to protect it. Or you could say they've been compromised at some level. They've chosen to look the other way. I mean, look, at Princeton, I saw Scott Ritter for the first time. I was one of the few students that was like, why are we invading Iraq? This is nonsense. Scott's telling us, Scott's a former Marine, UN weapons inspector. He's been there. He knows what's going on when it comes to the WMDs. Why don't you listen to Scott Ritter? And so many of my classmates were like, no, we got to go to war. We got to get Saddam, all this. So just because you go to a good college doesn't mean you're smart. It doesn't mean you have common sense. You used to sit around in classes talking about terrorism. I'm like, have you guys even been to Middle East? Have you been to Africa? Have you even engaged with any of these cultures you're talking about terrorism? I mean, it's just ridiculous, but they get groomed. They go to the colleges, they get groomed, they get told, oh yeah, this is what creates terrorism. And then you write some report, and then you go work in the State Department, and you get someone comes along and gives you an angle to sell. And essentially you never actually engage with reality. Or if you do, like I said, you get compromised, or you get a wake up call. Hey, you want to keep playing this game? Follow the leader. And that's all there is to it. So who's really in charge? I mean, does it really need a name? It's like the front men, we see them, the Soroses, the Klaus Schwabs, the Kissingers, the Gateses. I mean, they're all the front men. The money, there's obviously a huge amount of money behind them, but it's a system.
Yeah. Aside from the World Economic Forum, Scott, I'm going to digress back to you. What's a realistic off-ramp for the United States and Russia and all the parties involved in Ukraine? And also to that question I asked Jimmy, do you think this ideology from white ISIS could spread throughout?
Well, what you're calling white ISIS, I assume, is the neo-Nazi ideology.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'll start with that one by pointing out that, look, in 1944, my uncle went across the beach in Normandy 4 days after D-Day, but 4 days after. And then he was with a company of around 250 men who worked their way through France. They had a pretty easy campaign. The reason why I know this is that he came over to visit me when my family lived in Germany. My father was stationed there. And we went on a trip with him across the battlefields that he had been on. And it was all fun and games as we went through various French villages and everything. But then we got to Belgium, and we got to a farmer's field, and he came out of the car and he broke down and cried, because that was the point where German 88s opened up and killed 220 of the 250 men he had trained with and lived with. Instantly, boom, dead. These were German 88s fired by Nazis, by the people we're going to war with, the people that my country was engaged in total war against, an ideology that we said we were going to defeat, and we did defeat them, together with our Soviet allies, our British allies, our French allies. We defeated Nazi ideology, but then the war ended, and we decided that maybe Nazi ideology was convenient in our new war against Soviet Bolshevik ideology. That's why we took in the German 12th Intelligence Directorate, which was responsible for running human operations against a Soviet target, run by a guy named Galen. We took it in and turned it into the Galen organization working for the CIA. One of their tasks was to coordinate with this group called the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, led by a guy named Stepan Bandera, who had been working hand in glove with the Germans, the Nazis, coordinated to take on his own people. You know, we talk about Babi Yar in Kiev. 30,000 people gunned down in a day. The Germans ordered the killing. Ukrainian Nazis pulled the trigger. And these are the same people that belong to the organization of Ukrainian nationalists that now the CIA is running against the Soviets. From 1945 to 1955, there was an unconventional war, guerrilla war. Over 300,000 Ukrainians lost their lives at the hands of these Nazis. I don't mean to get angry, but let's not pretend they're anything other than that. Nazis supported, funded, trained, equipped, directed by the CIA, an American organization. And then after the revolt got crushed, we continued to fund their sick ideology until 1990, when the CIA stopped funding them. But we continued to support them as a rump organization, a political organization that existed in Western Ukraine. Then in 2014, actually 13, we empowered them by provoking what became the Maidan Revolution. What was supposed to be a peaceful demonstration by Ukrainians who meaningfully opposed Viktor Yushchenko, the Ukrainian president's name. I don't remember right now.
Wasn't it Podorowski?
Who sided with Putin on saying it's better to economically align with Russia than the European Union because of the conditions.
What's his name? Oh God.
Poroshenko?
No, it was before Poroshenko.
Podorowski, wasn't it?
No, it begins with Y. I can't remember.
Yanukovych.
Nowadays. My point is, we empowered them by allowing militarized Nazis to take over what was a peaceful demonstration, turn it into a military insurgency that overthrow Viktor Yushchenko, the legally elected president of Ukraine. And then they took over the Ukrainian government, supported by the United States. From 2015 to 2022, early 22, we trained the Ukrainian army, inclusive of the Nazis. There's photographs after photograph after photograph of American soldiers providing military training, the guys wearing the Azov patch on their uniform. We trained them. We socialized with them. We befriended them. This disgusts me to no end. So is there a danger of this ideology expanding? Oh, yeah. So long as we operate with the enemy of my enemy is my friend mentality. We know the Russians hate Nazis with a passion beyond belief. I used to work over there. I've lived with them. I know them. I've seen the monuments. They know the cost that was paid by their nation to defeat Nazi ideology. And they will never, ever, ever sleep until that ideology is eradicated from the face of the earth, especially from the nations that border it. And if you think you have a Nazi problem in Ukraine, guess what? Got one in Poland, got one in Lithuania, got one in Estonia, got one in Latvia, got one in Germany. If you don't think that Germany doesn't continue to be a festering cesspool of right-wing, racial, hateful Nazi ideology, you're wrong. We got it in France, it got it in England, it's all through Europe. And it exists, it's real, it lives. So yeah, I'm worried about what you call white ISIS, what I call Nazi ideology. And you know, I can disagree with Russia about a lot of things. Killing Nazis is not one I'll ever disagree with them on. My uncle was killing Nazis, and as long as Russians are killing Nazis, they're okay in my book. I forget what your first question was, but maybe I took too much time in answering the second part, so we can move it on.
Well, we'll let Laura kind of jump into that too as well. It was what is an off ramp? But Laura, I also want you to comment on the fact that all those idiots we talked about, that we don't care what they say, as far as when the mainstream media, is out there. The Hunter Biden laptop has now been authenticated of sorts, I guess, because they said they couldn't authenticate it for years and whatnot. However, I mean, for a lot of us who've been paying attention to what's been going on in Ukraine, this is nothing new. We know about Adam Schiff and his dirty hands there, how he had somebody involved, a Ukrainian oligarch, funding him here in the States, Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's son, John Kerry's godson. I mean, Mitt Romney even had dirty hands in there as well, and especially Joe Biden. Do you think that this time around, the people will perceive this stuff as anything different, especially now that we're knowing and we're finding out that Hunter Biden was attached to the funding of these biolabs?
I don't know what people will think. I never try to guess, obviously, because, I'm just a journalist. I'm not a prophet. and I'm not all seeing and all knowing. And the only thing that I can do, it's so overwhelming to uncover the truth when you're up against everything that we're up against. So that takes all my strength and all my energy, right? And I would just add to what Scott was saying, for those of you who have any doubt about the US history with Ukraine, go back to Allen Dulles as head of the CIA. Go back to what is, well documented. I mean, it's all over the place. It's not hard to find. And ask yourself why the United States, why the head of the CIA protected the Nazis of Ukraine from the Nuremberg trials. Now, some people will say, well, Western Ukraine was invaded by Hitler, but Western Ukraine became a base for the Nazis. It was a base for the SS, right? And Western Ukraine, as Scott pointed out, and as I have pointed out many times, many of Ukraine's Jews were killed by Ukrainians. They were not all killed by Germans. I mean, that's just not how it worked. There weren't enough Germans to go around to do all the killing. In fact, someone who is a specialist in genocide, because I've spent time in Eastern Europe investigating the Holocaust there and reported on this repeatedly for 60 Minutes. And what this gentleman who spent 18 years recording thousands and thousands and thousands of testimonies of eyewitnesses said to me was that you never find genocide without the collaborators. And the collaborators are always local. They are always, those are the Iraqis in Iraq. Those are the Ukrainians in Ukraine. Those are the Polish in Poland, right? And so on and so on and so on. And so, to me, though, if you focus on the Nazis and you focus on the Nazi ideology, you're missing the point here, because there is no real difference between, for example, the Antifa, the anti-fascists, and the Nazis, and very little difference. I mean, there are differences, but there's a lot that unites them with communists and Marxists as well. These are just different sides of the same coin. None of these people believe in freedom. None of these people believe in God. None of these people believe in having, a constitution and a Bill of Rights and living the way that we live, being you, right? I mean, it goes back to your question to Sean, which he answered in part, but didn't answer fully, and for good reasons. We all know those reasons. I mean, some of it, we just don't know who the puppet masters are. We do see their front men, but we don't know who all of the puppet masters are. And if we did, you have to think that, part of mapping out who they are is part of what we've been doing for the last, I don't know how many years. And what that brings us to is, these people are being used just like the Marxists are being used in the United States. The people who are pulling the strings here, they don't intend to go into a global world that is all Marxist, right? Where, no, that's not our future. We have something else now. It's called technology. And technology changes everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was Lenin wasn't able to reach 3.5 billion people on the planet at the same time, the way Facebook is. And when you add Google and Facebook and Twitter and you start to add them all together, you start to see a very, very, very different kind of world. And what is different about this war is that they've already put in place their global governing structures and their local governing structures as well. Their local government infrastructure of affinity groups. So whether you're LGBTQ or you believe in rights for prisoners or, you're social justice or you're race-based or whatever it happens to be, animal rights. Why is the Animal Rights Federation in more than 87 countries? Why is the Open Society Foundation in more than 120 countries? Why does Black Lives Matter have a global policy, a global network? Why does Open Society Foundation have a university? Why do these organizations that are supposed to be charities have policy foundations? Why are they involved in all of this? Because they are already implementing the One World Order, which, by the way, already exists in the digital realm. I mean, our laws don't matter in the digital realm. What, antitrust? Give me a break. We got a couple of monopolies controlling everything worldwide. Borders don't mean anything to them. Accountability. One of the last things that Obama did as president was sign over ownership of the internet to the global community. And at the time, I never understood that executive order. I think it was an executive order. I'm not 100% sure. And I kept trying to think, why would you do that? And a number of cyber people said to me, well, we just lost jurisdiction when you did that. And the US actually created the internet. So why would you give up jurisdiction? But more than that, you gave ownership to the people that you intend to be in charge, right? The global community. And so what's amazing is that we're attacked for even using those words. You know, you're savaged as an unhinged conspiracy theorist if you use the words that they're using. And here's one point, Scott, where I don't agree with what you said. Oh, no, it wasn't you, Jimmy, it was you. When you said that Biden, who has dementia, makes these mistakes and goes too far, right? Actually, if you look at the tactic and the strategy that's being implemented there, they use Biden and use his dementia as a cover to shape the narrative the way they want it to go. That, again, is a shaping operation, which is projecting where we're headed. And the classic example of this is Hillary Clinton in the 2016 campaign saying her speech about deplorables. Because what did the White House do, and what did her campaign do at the time, right? They immediately walked it back and did exactly what they did with Joe Biden. Oh, she misspoke. Oh, she went too far. Oh, she didn't mean that. But that's not true, is it? Because what have we seen ever since that speech was made? We've seen every single American who doesn't submit to their ideology and their way of thinking be vilified as one form of deplorable or another. And the term has stuck. And that tells you the truth about what you're listening to. So I don't believe that Joe Biden makes these mistakes. I believe that these are shaping operations that are easily blamed on and dismissed on a demented old man who's somehow not so demented that he can't be medicated into doing exactly what they need him to do. And I have a real issue with the whole idea of accountability there. What happens to accountability if we just dismiss Biden as the ravings of a demented old lunatic who doesn't know what he's doing? Well, you can see what they're going to do. They're going to put it all on Biden and say that was all him. And, we tried to stop him, right? But we couldn't because he wasn't well. I mean, they've already put the cover operation in place at the same time. So these things really frustrate me because I don't see Nazism or Marxism or communism or any of these things as the ultimate end state. These are just tactics being used. You need to control the Nazis. What do? Go back to Joseph Goebbels, right? They control both sides of the narrative and they fund both sides of the narrative. So they fund the Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer and the Nazis and the neo-Nazis and whoever else at the same time as they fund Antifa. And by the way, guess who else trains in the Ukraine? It's not just the Nazis who are training there. It's Antifa is training there. And they're a global organization too. And organization, not organization, call them what you like. They're set up to be a network, right? Mm-hmm. A networked organization. So they're not just one organization with a governing structure. Sure, that's true. But they want you to get buried in the semantics. In truth, there is a very organized system that has been set up where they send out, they learn lessons, whether it's in Hong Kong, where they perfected the tactic move like water, which is what they use to evade tear gas, where they move like water, and then they have squads who are trained to pick up the tear gas canisters, who have the gas masks and can survive it, and they toss them, and then the crowd moves like water back into position so that you don't lose any ground. These are all discussed on their websites. You can go to Crime Think, you can go to the Anarchist Library, you can read about it, you can listen to podcasts where they describe it in their own words, the siege of Minneapolis, what succeeded, what didn't succeed, what they learned. They proliferate that amongst Russian anarchists. They do it in Europe, they do it everywhere. And, if you don't believe me, why do you think the Black Bloc of Antifa, they all wear the same? You see them in Ukraine. I mean, there is a collection of videos on the internet that is so bizarre and crazy, you don't even want to talk about it. But if you understand Antifa's tactics, it's perfect. Because there's the Ukrainian guy in head to toe in black with his hoodie and everything, dressed like every other Black Bloc member of Antifa, so that when you describe to the police what they look like, you say, oh, he's wearing a black hoodie, right? Yeah. And all in black, and nobody can identify them. And what is he doing? He's got a giant dildo and he's beating up these Romani women on the street with this giant dildo, which, you know, anyone saying those words sounds stupid and crazy and, you know, and ridiculous. But
I don't
why
want to
do they
cut
do
you
that?
off, Laura.
Because they
but
carry weapons that are never identified as weapons. And when you write about it and talk about it, you look like the idiots. But it's still the tactics of fear and intimidation and violence that are endorsed by these organizations and their political backers. And Ukraine is at the center of all of that.
I don't mean to cut you off because some people have a heart out. Just Oz, put up that graphic really quick. I just want to really quickly get your comment about this, Jimmy. And I know you got to get out of here. I'll let you give you the last words. Let's get over to YouTube only really quickly. After we show the graph, it says, how should Canada respond to Ukraine invasion?
I saw this. This is something.
Yeah. Everybody was talking about this. This just blows my mind because if you put me in a time machine and you made me go back to when I first registered as a Democrat, it was because of the Iraq war. Well, this particular graph, and it talks about what's going on in Canada, but it does tell a different story. In the blue, it says respondents who said they received